All right, hey guys, Dr. Sean here. We're going to do a live today, and I thought, it's our kind of weather's changed outside. We're in the Midwest. Everything's gotten a little crazy here, all the way from really Canada all the way down through Texas. Cold, everyone's home, so I thought we'll do a little fun thing. We'll talk about vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin. And I thought, there's so much out there. There's so many things that are going on that I could go through some of the basics that we all know, but I wanted to share with you 4 little secrets that maybe your doctor doesn't even know about. And these are big deals when it comes to vitamin D, as we're all taking supplements right now. Everyone's running for these things all the time. So if we had something that could maybe give you a little extra in your piggy bank, it'd be nice to know. So let's start with this stuff. What do we know? Now, vitamin D came out it was discovered in 1928, roughly. In 32, they figured out the synthetic form of D2. In 37, they figured out the D3 variation. Now, why does all that even matter? Well, they were hunting for things. Back in the day, they were worried about what they called the old world diseases, things like scurvy and rickets and beriberi, stuff we don't ever see anymore. These were very, very common for a very long part of human history. And then they learned that these vitamins all of a sudden had these great impacts on these diseases. And rickets was really where the vitamin D came from. That's where the research was being scheduled through. So you had guys out of England, you had a guy out of Wisconsin, a really cool guy out of Wisconsin, a German chemist that was doing work with these things. And all of them together in one form or another had help in this. They all contributed to either the D2, D3, and that sort of thing. So when we look at this, we start thinking, okay, so this is vitamin D. Now, we know if you get too much, it can be toxic, but we really don't know how much is too much, right? We hear this all the time from guys. And if you go to your doctor and they say, oh, you're vitamin D deficient, they'll give you 50,000 units per week, sometimes upwards of 100,000 units. It's like, well, doc, what about toxicity? So we got to go through this a little bit. And I thought I'd put some of these myths to bed. And I'm going to share some things with you that I think you probably do not know. And it should be really, really fun. And it's going to change your whole viewpoint, I think, of really vitamins in general, especially vitamin D. Now, here's where we're going to start the table. Vitamin D is a hormone. It's a steroid-based hormone. Be aware of that. Vitamin C and B and those guys aren't. But D is unique. D is actually a steroid-based type hormone. So when you get that in the body, you think, all right, so it's not going to act like all the other vitamins. It's going to do something different. It's going to affect my body differently. Now, with the whole COVID thing coming along, everybody and their brother's running for vitamin D. Everyone's going for it. And it makes sense because we know it has a major, major role in immune function. Question is why? Why does it have a big role in immune function? What is it really doing in there? And we come back to that real core basis we just talked about. It's a hormone. It's a steroid-based hormone. So it affects all kinds of things in the body, from calcium absorption, it deals with iron, it deals with the thyroid and the parathyroid, the intestines, the GI tract. All these guys are involved. So you got to understand a few basics about it, but here's the real key. When vitamin D comes into the body, it tends to be in its more inactive form, meaning it doesn't do much. It's like having a car with no keys, but you got to have the key for it. You got to be able to turn that little guy on. And so your liver and your kidneys play a major, major role in this conversion, this turning on of vitamin D. So you could take it by the truckloads, and if the liver's not doing its job, or the kidneys over there taking a nap, or there's something wrong with either of those two organs, then guess what? You're not going to use this vitamin efficiently, and it doesn't matter how much you put in. So that's a big, big deal here, and it's something that has to be really looked at, because when they're measuring blood tests for vitamin D, they're really looking for that active form that has been converted through the liver and your kidneys. Now, knowing all of that, let's go a little bit further into this thing. So we saw COVID, we saw immune function, but what else is there? Right? What other things do you see? Now, Cleveland Clinic came out and said, look, if you're fatigued for no reason, suspect vitamin D. And if you notice, well, my immune system's been kind of running behind lately. I'm always catching colds. I never can seem to kick that thing out. It's always hanging on to me. Suspect vitamin D. You can also look for muscle pain. Just random weird muscle aches, right? Now think about that. Why? Because vitamin D and calcium are married. They help each other an awful lot, and calcium is absolutely critical for muscle contraction. Well, you also see that it's very, very important, calcium and many other minerals, for your bone health. So you can have bone aching and things of that nature. The bones just hurt. How about this guy, right? It gets forgetful. we've seen that vitamin D levels, when they're dropped, dementia goes up at least double, if not triple normal. Now, we got to come back to that hormone thing. Don't forget about that, because I'm going to have some food for thought for you at the end of all this. So as we go through that, we think, okay, so vitamin D, it's a hormone. Oh, okay, and hormones. Oh, blood sugar now, because cortisol regulates that, doesn't it? And so you see also insulin gets in there, another hormone. So vitamin D is a big player in the endocrine system. And we know that dementia and Alzheimer's have been nicknamed type 3 diabetes, blood sugar problems. But we all get hooked on, oh, it's too many carbohydrates. Maybe not. Maybe it's poor fat utilization. Maybe the body's struggling with those fatty hormones. Food for thought, something to think about. Now, Mayo goes a little bit further. Mayo goes in there and says, look, if you have a GI disorder of any kind, anything, heartburn, reflux, gastritis, Crohn's, celiacs, ulcerative colitis, you name any of those things, you got them, IBS in there too, then you're probably going to be vitamin D deficient, because it has to come through there naturally unless you're making it. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So we think, oh, all right, all my GI stuff. Anybody that's ever had a weight loss surgery, anybody that's got osteopenia or osteoporosis, any kind of bone loss, you're probably going to be deficient. And anyone that's stuck indoors. Now, I thought this was appropriate for this weekend because we're all stuck indoors, right? It was cold and snowy and windy, and not many of us are outside going, well, I really like the dark, freezing cold. We move indoors, but it's the sunshine vitamin. And when we're indoors, we don't get a lot. So think about all those people in assisted living centers, in nursing homes, hospitals, children in school all day long. This is a reason why you want recess outside. If you never knew, this is a big reason behind it. Now, we look at these things and say, okay, so we got Cleveland Clinic and Mayo, both very respected hospital-type situations, saying, look, this is what happens. And when we get these things and we know it affects immune system and all these other functions, forgetfulness and fatigue and our brain function and all of our hormones, holy cow, it's a lot. It's a lot. So what do? What are our 4 things? What are the things that we need to know? Okay, here we go. A, how much do you have to take? That's a big one, isn't it? How much do you actually have to take of this stuff? So you need 800, what they call international units per day, roughly. Now, what does that all mean? International, all right, it's just how much you put in, right? It's how much, do you add a teaspoon of something or a tablespoon? That's really what you're looking at here. So when we look at this, we say, okay, we're supposed to get this, but if I'm immune suppressed, then I can't get this, right? If I have GI problems, then I can't get this. So then I have to look for, all right, well, where do I get it from? Can I get it from my diet? Can I get it from supplements? Sure you can. Can I get it without either one of those two? Absolutely. You can get the most that way. That's pretty crazy, isn't it? So let's take a little further. Now, here's the deal. Not all vitamin D is created equal. And this is the big one here. This is really, really big. There's a lot of debate in the medical community about this. I was on a site from Harvard Medical School, and they had endocrinologists saying, well, D2 and D3 are the same thing, and it doesn't matter. They're full of crap. It does matter. They just don't know what they're doing. And that's okay, because they don't deal in this world. When you're looking at how this works, D2, vitamin D2, remember, D is really a family of vitamins. It's not one kind. It's a family. So we're going to look at D2. Ergocalciferol is the term. I always remember when I was a kid because it's let go my ego. You don't want the one you got to let go of, right? You don't want that guy. That's the guy that's hard to absorb. It doesn't get utilized by the body easily. And blood tests prove it. When you supplement with vitamin D3 or cholecalciferol, that one bumps blood. You just watch the D levels start going up. When you put D2 in, they don't move a whole lot. Now the question becomes, well, why? What's the difference? One comes from a plant, one comes from animals. D2 comes out of your plants, mainly mushrooms of all things. D3 tends to come out of your animals. You'll get it out of red meat. You get a lot out of seafood, and that is a big, big, big thing here. Seafood. Now this gets interesting here now. So why would they ever use D2 then? It doesn't get used. It's cheap. That's why. All you got to do is pick up your vitamin set and flip it around. If it says D2 on it and you're after it for D, throw it away. Pitch it. Be done with it. It's worthless to you. It's not easily absorbable. It's not easily usable by the body. It has a hard time converting from that inactive to active state. It just doesn't get used well. All right, then be done with it. But that tells you something about that vitamin company, doesn't it? So when you're buying that expensive vitamin, you look at this and you say, oh, they use D2 in here. All right, what do they really believe in? They believe in profits above healthcare. And that's not what we're about, right? That's why we're the Robin Hood of healthcare. We're trying to help you here. So look for the D3s. Now, here's the next thing you want to do. They found that the D2s don't do well on a store shelf. So the longer that's been processed, the longer it's had stuff done to it, the longer it's been in the bottle, it becomes less and less and less effective in the body. Well, it's already not good to begin with. You make it sit there for long periods of time, it's almost worthless. So again, another reason to go back to that D3. Now, let's take this. We're looking at supplements. Well, we could do that, but talk about food, right? What about food? Now, this is the food conundrum. And this is interesting. I just, when I was researching all this for you guys, I found this very fascinating to me. Fresh versus farm raised. Big difference. I mean, day and night game changer difference here. So if we look at salmon, for example, fresh wild caught salmon can have roughly 1,300 international units of vitamin D in a serving. Now, that's your entire day. If you only need 800 for the day, you get a serving of salmon and man, you're rock star for the day. If you buy a farm-raised salmon, it drops to 250. 1,300 to 250. Now, right away, my mind got thinking, well, is that true for all things like this? So I started looking for other sources of vitamin D. Now, of course, there's perch and cod, there's herring, there's mackerel, there's sardines. They all have it. Tuna has it too. But I thought, get out of the seafood world. Let's look at something else. How about eggs? Eggs have vitamin D. It's in the yolk. Right? And we'll do a whole other video some other time on egg whites versus yolk. If you're not eating the yolk, don't bother eating the white. Just food for thought, and we'll talk about that later. But ideally, all your vitamins, your minerals, your fats, your good stuff is in the yolk. Protein's in the white, but you got to have both to make them work. Ironically, you got to have them both to make a chicken. Who would have ever thought? So when you look at this thing, you think to yourself, okay, so my egg yolk now, and look at that, it doesn't have a ton, right? It doesn't have a ton, but a natural chicken that's allowed to peck at the ground and do its little bugs and worms in the sunlight, its egg yolk can have almost 150 international units of vitamin D in it. You put that thing in a barn, in a cage somewhere or something like that, it drops to 32. Just like that. So that made me start thinking, I'm like, wow, so how our animals are allowed to live, how they're allowed to feed, how they're allowed to carry on life dramatically affects a hormone that they produce. Shocking as that may be. It does. So if you have the luxury of buying a farm-raised animal that's been outdoors its whole life versus something in a stock pond or something, it's a different animal, right? If you can get farm-raised animals that are, grass-fed or chickens that are allowed to graze and do things like that, free range, I think is what you'll see the term, it's going to be better for you. Now, if you don't have that luxury, it's still okay. We're still getting some of the nutrients. But I thought that was very interesting because it's like, wow, it really makes a difference in our livestock. Do you think it makes a difference in you? Food for thought, something to think about. So let's move on now. We've got supplements, right? D2, D3, we know 3 is better, right? And there's going to come in all kinds of different doses, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 to 5,000 is what you're going to see in international units. Then you go down and you start saying, okay, what about the food? Well, we said all those great seafoods. We mentioned those for you. Eggs are great. Butter's wonderful. Get all that stuff in there if you can. Whole fat. We'll talk about that in a minute. But then we come to this thing called timing. Now, timing is something that I use it a lot. I've written numerous weight loss programs in my career. I probably have currently 2,500 offices around the world using weight loss programs that I've had a hand in. And it's exciting, right? It's great to help doctors and physicians do this. But I've written dozens of programs. And the key thing I always talk about is timing. Timing is everything. Timing when it comes to vitamin D is critical because you need the sunshine. This is why it's called the sunshine vitamin. Now, how does it work? Literally the exact same way your plant does. It's the one thing the human body actually kind of semi-looks like photosynthesis. We literally take the sunlight and those little UV rays, we take those guys in, we mix it with cholesterol in our skin, which is a fat. We mix it with that cholesterol, and the next thing you know, bang, we have vitamin D3. Who knew? So we look at this thing, we think, wow, so when I'm out in the sun, my body's literally taking that sunlight in and it's absorbing it. It's mixing it around the bowl with that cholesterol and it's creating the D3 that I need. Well, how much does it create? That'd be the great question. 10,000 units at least, 10 to 15,000 units every 10 minutes. That's not a bad deal. Vitamins are anywhere from 500 to 1,000 to 5,000. The best food on the market is salmon, and it has to be fresh and wild, and you look at that, and that's 1,300. So we look at that and think, wow, 10,000 in 10 minutes is a pretty good deal. But now comes my Peter Pan rule. You gotta follow the Peter Pan rule. Doc, how do you know when the sun does this? Because it doesn't do it all day. There's a window of time, right? They'll tell you roughly between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. is when the sun is at its highest peak to create these rays that allow for vitamin D to form in the human body. I call it the Peter Pan rule because you look at your shadow. If your shadow gets longer or taller than you, you're not getting the right sun anymore. It's over. So when your shadow is shorter than you, you're going to get the right sun. When the shadow gets longer than you, it's over for that day. You got to wait till the next one. All right, so that's a really cool little rule, and it's something you can think about no matter where you are. You're like, oh, heck, shadow's too long. I'm not going to get my vitamin D today, no matter how sunny it is. You're just not going to get it. Now, it also changes in the seasons. So the winter months versus the spring versus the summer, obviously you can tell how cold it is outside. The poles move a little bit. We get a little closer, a little further away from that sun. So depending on the season and what latitude you're at determines how long you have to be exposed to that sunshine. So if you're around the equator, you're looking, 10 minutes will get you. You get north of that, though, and all of a sudden 10 has to turn into 20. 20 has to turn into 30. You get way north, Canada, New York, and up, you might need 90 minutes of exposure, but not at a time. A week. That's the key. Spread it out over a week. 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, a little here, a little there. And we got to come back to sunburns and sunscreens and all that stuff as we kind of move on here a little bit. Now, here's another thing that we didn't know, that maybe you didn't know. Sunlight, right, produces this lovely little vitamin D for us. But melatonin is also in here, and vitamin D and melatonin are on a teeter-totter. So as one goes, whoop, the other one goes. They're inversely proportional to each other. So it's very much like a teeter-totter. So when we look at this, we think, okay, so wait a minute now. So when's the best time then to get my sun supplement? When should I take that? Would I want to take it at night? When melatonin is dominating the scene? It's another hormone, isn't it? That allows you to sleep. So when you think, well, if I put that vitamin D in at nighttime, I may not use it very well because it's going to compete with another hormone in there. It's going to start messing with things. So when you take a supplemental vitamin D, guys, get it in before noon. That's the rule. Drop it in before noon. Let it get in there in the sunshine hours in that morning. Before noon if you can do it. Let the melatonin do its job at night. And that's just kind of a neat little fun thing maybe you didn't know. Now, when we go this next step, now we're looking at another thing we wouldn't know. How about digestion, right? This is kind of the fourth in my group of things. Digestion is the key to this, guys. Vitamin D, A, E, and K are what they call fat soluble, meaning if there's no fat being digested adequately, if it's not getting used, if your gallbladder's gone, if you've got biliary problems, liver issues, GI issues, you're probably going to have trouble with this family of fat soluble vitamins. Now you look at that and you think, all right, so if my digestion gets messed up, if I don't use my fat well, what else would I see, right? You'd see fertility problems. All kinds of stuff. Stiff, sore, achy joints for no reason. It's grease. Things don't move so well. That rib cage gets tight and you sometimes get anxious. You feel your heart pounding and pitter-pattering in there and you can't get things going. And the number one sign of this, you just walk up to somebody and you run your hands across the top of their shoulders. Say, oh my gosh, you had a really stressful day. That's how you know they're fat deficient. If their shoulders have climbed into their ears, they're fat deficient. The body's, look, I don't have enough. So this brings us back to this whole idea of why I run an IUP in my practice, that integrated urinalysis panel. It's going to look at all of this. It just lets me know. I don't have to guess, right? To see is to know. To not see, you're guessing. I don't want to guess when it comes to this. So let's recap these things. Let's go back through our four here. Really, who needs it, how much, and when? How to get it in, right? What are the best things for it? Timing is everything. We talked about that. And we talked about digestion is really the key to this thing. Because most of these things you saw from Cleveland Clinic, you saw from the Mayo Clinic, that they all said, look, if you got GI problems, you're going to have trouble getting this vitamin D. And guys, if you can't get the raw materials for your immune system, then how's it going to function? Again, it doesn't matter if I take it all day long. If I have to have the fat to absorb the D out of my belly and my gut, how am I going to get it in? You ever notice all the foods I mentioned? Butter, salmon, cod, herring, mackerel, all those things are kind of fatty? Huh. So it's almost like nature has this little funny intelligence in it, and it actually knew what the hell it was doing. Who'd have thought? Now, I'm going to leave you with some questions here. These are things that as I was preparing this for you today, because we're off because of the snow, I thought, I'll give you some good questions. These are fun ones, so I'll go through this here. What if I don't digest fat well? let's start there. That's question number one. Something to ponder. What if you don't digest fat? How would you know, first off? Unless you have major symptoms, you know, dry skin, eczema, psoriasis, fertility issues, prostate problems, PCOS, all those. If you have those, those are obvious, all right? You have fatty issues. But what if you don't have those? You can run an IUP, but it's something to think about. Because if I don't have that, I can't get the vitamin D. Now let's look at another one. How about statins? There's an interesting one, isn't it? All those cholesterol-lowering drugs. So we look at that and think, all right, so if I put a cholesterol-lowering drug into my system, and it lowers your cholesterol, that's what it does. It lowers it, but I have to have that cholesterol to make this hormone vitamin. So if I suppress the cholesterol, get rid of the flour in the cake, and all I have left is the milk and the eggs, it's really hard to make a cake. I'm missing an ingredient. Food for thought, something to think about, right? All those people then who are theoretically on statin drugs and cholesterol-lowering medications might all be severely vitamin D deficient. And then that's going to affect what we saw, fatigue and tiredness and joint pain and stiffness and achiness and muscle problems and memory issues. I don't know. Something to think about, right? How about this one? Can you overdose on this stuff? I get asked this a lot. Doc, can I take too much vitamin D? The only overdoses I've ever seen were from supplements. It's the only ones. People taking way too much supplementally. Now, again, we go back to medicine. They will inject, a lot of times, 50,000 units of this stuff at one time. Or they'll give you an oral that's got huge amounts of this stuff. And they'll do it week after week after week for several months. Most of the studies I've seen done on this show that when someone is severely vitamin C deficient, they can handle 50,000 units a week for up to a year. So the odds of getting toxic on it are not real high by supplement. But here's a good note. No one has ever been toxic off of vitamin D from the sun. Ever. So when your body makes it, naturally, there's zero toxicity. No side effect. Isn't that funny? None. All right, cool. Then get it that way if you can, as long as you have the fat digestion and the cholesterol to make it. All right, what else we got here? Sunscreens. You know, I get this one all the time. Doc, what about sunscreens? Guys, you need 10 minutes is what we're looking at here. 10 minutes up to 30 minutes total, weekly, bi-weekly, something like that. So if you can get 10 minutes, say 3 times a week. 10 minutes 3 times a week. That's going to help a lot, unless you're really down the well. All right, then you may need 10 minutes 6 times a week. That needs to be unprotected. Now, I know everyone's worried about skin cancers and things like that, and I'm going to do a whole cancer thing one of these days for you guys. But ideally, that 10 minutes, you're not going to get cancer from that. That doesn't happen that way, okay? 10 minutes, just good old-fashioned you, all right? Chest, inner arms, facial area, things like that. Then you can go cover up. Then you can protect and wear and do all your stuff like that. 10 minutes will be just fine, and you'll do really well with that to get that. If D and melatonin are related, could this affect my sleep, my mood, and fatigue? Right? Think about it. Just, again, things to ponder. D and melatonin, right? They're opposite ends of that teeter-totter. If one gets off, wouldn't it automatically cause the other one to be out of balance? It'd throw it off. And so what do? They affect my sleep. They affect my mood. They affect my memory, my brain function. So my gosh, my anxiousness, my depression, my feeling of overwhelmed, fearful, worried, scared, fidgety, restless, angry, all of that could be just because I don't use fat well and I don't get my vitamin? Yeah, could be. How about this one? How long does it take to balance it? When you start popping it in, you know you're low, you've run a blood test, you've done something, or you got a bunch of these symptoms. How long does it take to actually bring this thing around? How long does it take to circle the wagons in this case? All right, 8 to 12 weeks is the rule. It takes roughly 8 to 12 weeks of you trying to do something about it. Increasing in your diet, getting more sunshine, doing things of that nature. And you should see it on a lab test easily. If you don't want to do a lab test, watch all your symptoms go away. If they disappear, hey, that's a pretty good deal. So I like that. The last thing to remember, guys, is that vitamin D, again, is a hormone. A steroid-based hormone. And all of your hormones are in something called an endocrine system. It's called a system for a reason, right? It's a system. It's not one part, like, oh, there's something wrong with the thyroid. Yeah, but it's also part of the system. And so if there's something wrong with my thyroid, there must be something wrong with the other parts of my system. And there always is. which is why I believe you see a lot of hiccups in endocrinology where they're chasing a piece of the system, not looking at the whole. So be aware that it's part of a system. Balance the system. How do you do that? The only way you know how. Feed it. Give it what it needs. Keep your diet somewhat balanced. Move that body around. Get your sleep and rest. And great, great things can help you. So I hope this helped you a bunch. Understand things about vitamin D you never knew. And I'll guarantee you, if you go back and watch this, you probably can go to your doc, ask them half of this stuff, and they'll be like, wow, I had no idea. And that's cool, too, because you might as well teach them. They're teaching you. Why not teach them something back? I'm Dr. Sean, guys. I'm the Robin Hood of Healthcare. Make sure you like it, share it, and send it out to everyone. See ya. Bye.